I went on a hike across the prairie one evening with a friend. We had planned it as a day hike, nothing more than a loop across some trails that cut through the rolling grassland, wide open skies above us, nothing but the long sweep of the horizon in every direction. The prairies have this deceptive look. They seem flat and harmless, but when you're actually walking through them, the land rises and falls in soft swells, dotted with low shrubs and endless tufts of tall grass. It's beautiful in a way that's hard to explain, the kind of open space that makes you feel very small. That day, though, beauty turned into something else by the time we were heading back. The hike itself took longer than expected. We misjudged how far the trail looped out, and the sun started sinking faster than we thought it would. By the time we were headed back toward the car, the light was slipping away. It wasn't dark yet. The sky still glowed in that strange twilight way where it seems bright overhead, but the ground was already dark enough that we could hardly see where we were putting our feet. It's a strange effect when your eyes are locked on the lit-up sky while the world below fades into shadow. Your vision doesn't adjust properly. The land at your feet becomes a blur, the tufts of grass turning into a tangled sea of dark shapes. We trudged through the tall grass, some of it brushing our knees, some of it nearly up to our thighs in spots where it had grown thicker. My boots caught on clumps more than once, and every step made a dull swish as the blades bent and snapped underfoot. I was in front of my friend, leading the way because I knew the rough direction we needed to go. The horizon was still painted in pale orange and deepening purple, but down in the grass it was almost night. I kept telling myself it wasn't far now, maybe half an hour at most. That's when it happened. I took a step, the same way I had taken thousands of steps that day, lifting my boot and planting it forward through the thick mat of grass. The moment my sole hit the ground, I heard it, a sound that no one on the prairie ever wants to hear. The dry, chilling rattle of a snake's tail, coiled and furious directly beneath me. It was the kind of sound that bypasses thought and drills straight into instinct. Sharp, buzzing, alive. It's not like hearing a bird call or the wind in the grass. It's immediate and deadly, the warning of something you know could kill you in seconds if you make the wrong move. By the time my brain processed it, my body was already moving. I launched myself forward, sprinting blindly into the grass. My legs pumped as fast as they could go, stumbling, catching on tufts, but never stopping. My chest hammered, lungs burning as panic ripped through me. The sound of that rattle followed me for a split second in memory, like it was etched into my ears. I didn't dare look back. I stopped only when I had put what felt like 30 meters between me and that spot. My boots dug into the dirt, chest heaving, my whole body trembling with the shock of it. I bent over slightly, running my hands down my legs, feeling for the sharp sting of fangs or the wet warmth of blood. My heart pounded so hard it made my vision blur. But there was nothing. No bite, no pain, no swelling. Just the ghost of that rattle in my head. The grass around me swayed in the dim light. Everything looked the same, endless tufts bending in the wind, dark against the pale glow of the sky. My friend's footsteps caught up behind me, heavy and uneven in the thick growth. We didn't need to say anything. The air itself carried the weight of what had just happened. I stood there for a long minute, breathing hard, staring back into the shadowed stretch of prairie I had just run from. Somewhere back there, hidden perfectly in the grass, was the rattlesnake. Maybe it was still coiled and tense, head lifted, eyes fixed on the spot where I had been a moment ago. Maybe it had already slithered deeper into the tangle, vanishing without a trace like they do. Either way, it was close enough to end the day very differently. The rest of the hike back was slow, careful, and tense. Every step through the grass felt like a gamble. The light was fading even more now, the orange glow on the horizon fading to deep purple, and the ground at our feet looked black. I kept lifting my boots higher than usual, planting them slowly, watching for the faintest flicker of movement. The swishing of the grass around us suddenly sounded like it could hide anything. Every rustle made me flinch. The prairie, which had felt wide and open just hours earlier, now seemed endless and hostile. The thought of how many snakes could be hidden in the grass at that moment made my skin crawl. It's not that rattlesnakes are everywhere, but they don't need to be. Just one in the right place is enough to make you realize how vulnerable you are. When we finally saw the faint outline of the trailhead and the darker shape of the car parked against the fading sky, relief flooded through me. My legs ached from the run, my chest still tight, but the sight of that vehicle was grounding. A piece of the normal world waiting at the edge of the prairie. We reached it just as the last light was bleeding out of the sky. The stars were beginning to show, faint pinpricks overhead, and the ground was swallowed in full darkness. I stood there by the car, staring back into the sea of grass we had just come through. It stretched on without end, black against the horizon, hiding whatever lived in it. Somewhere out there was the snake I had stepped on, or maybe dozens more we never saw. That moment changed the way I looked at the prairie. I had always thought of it as wide, open, and safe in its emptiness. But after stepping on a rattlesnake in fading light, I realized how fragile that feeling was. The land may look harmless, but it holds its own dangers, silent until the moment you stumble too close. I didn't get bitten. I walked away unharmed, but it was pure chance, nothing more. If my boot had pressed down at a slightly different angle, or if the snake had struck faster, I would have been another story told about why you don't hike the prairie at dusk. I was lucky, and now, every time I see those long stretches of grass rippling under the sky, I don't just see beauty. I see what waits hidden beneath it, silent until it decides otherwise. I've hiked a lot of trails, and most of the time they're peaceful. You get into a rhythm, boots on dirt, steady breathing, the sound of the wind in the trees. You carry water, snacks, and sometimes your worries, and for a while the woods take them away. But every so often, something happens out there that reminds you just how alone you really are, and how quickly a calm hike can turn into something else. This was one of those times. It was late summer when I decided to push a little further into a trail system I didn't know that well. I'd heard it connected a couple of ridges with views of the valley below, and I figured I could be back before dark if I kept a good pace. The day was warm but not unbearable, and the trail itself was decent. Mostly packed dirt, patches of loose rock, and some overgrowth here and there. Nothing I hadn't handled before. For the first couple of hours, it was exactly what I wanted. Quiet, steady walking, just the occasional bird darting through the trees or a chipmunk flashing across the trail. My shirt stuck to my back with sweat, and my legs burned on the climbs, but that's the kind of tired that feels good. The first hint that something wasn't right came around mid-afternoon. I noticed how empty the trail was. No other hikers, no distant chatter or dogs barking. Nothing. I kept telling myself it wasn't strange. Lots of people avoided the heat, and maybe this section just wasn't popular. Still, the silence pressed in harder than usual, the kind that makes you start paying attention to every sound you make. By the time I reached the ridge, the sky had already started changing. The blue was fading, taking on that dull, flat look that means the sun is slipping away even if it's not below the horizon yet. I hadn't realized how long I'd been moving. I stayed at the overlook just long enough to drink some water, snap a picture, and shift my pack. Then I started down again, trying to make good time. That's when the trail started to feel different. It wasn't anything obvious, just little things. The way the path narrowed more than I remembered. The way the brush on either side seemed thicker, higher. A low rustling sound off to the right that stopped the second I froze to listen. My mouth went dry, and I pushed on faster, telling myself it was just a rabbit or a bird. But then I hit a section where the trail ran flat for a while, and I realized I wasn't sure I was on the right one anymore. The dirt looked less traveled, grass pushing up through the middle, branches crowding down. I checked my watch, ran the math in my head. I still had time to make it out before dark if I didn't waste it second-guessing. So I kept going. A few minutes later, the smell hit me, sharp and sour, heavy enough that I actually stopped in my tracks. I'd smelled dead animals in the woods before. Mice, rabbits, even a deer once, but this was stronger, fresher. The kind of smell that crawls into the back of your throat and sticks. I tried not to look for it, tried to keep my eyes on the dirt in front of me, but the stench followed for a good stretch of trail. My stomach knotted, and every part of me wanted to turn back. I didn't, though. I just gritted my teeth and kept walking until the smell thinned out and the air felt cleaner again. The light was fading fast by then. The trail was darker under the trees, my eyes straining to adjust, and every shadow looked like it might move. I clicked on my headlamp earlier than I wanted to, the beam cutting a narrow tunnel through the underbrush. That helped, but it also made me feel exposed, like anything out there could see exactly where I was. That's when I started hearing it. Footsteps. At first I thought it was just echo from my own boots, but then I noticed the timing. Every time I slowed, they slowed. When I stopped completely, the sound kept going for 2, 3, maybe 4 more steps before cutting off. My skin prickled hot and cold at the same time. I spun around with my light, sweeping it across the trees. Nothing, just branches, grass, the occasional rock. My pulse hammered in my ears. I stood there a long minute, barely breathing, before I forced myself to keep moving. The sound came back, always behind me, always matching. I couldn't make sense of it. If it was an animal, it was walking upright. If it was another hiker, why didn't they just pass me? Why stay hidden? I kept walking, faster this time, my shoulders tight, one hand gripping the strap of my pack like it would do me any good. My headlamp beam bounced with every step, lighting up patches of grass and roots, giving me nothing solid to focus on. I wanted so badly to break into a run, but the trail was too rough, too easy to twist an ankle on in the dark. I don't know how long it went on. It felt like forever, my ears straining for every crunch of dirt and gravel behind me. At one point, I cut my light and stood perfectly still, heart pounding, hoping to catch them moving in the dark. For a few seconds, there was nothing, just silence, and then crack, a stick snapping somewhere close, too close. I switched the light back on, snapped my head around, and finally caught movement. A shape ducking back into the trees, just beyond the reach of my beam. Human height, definitely not an animal. That was it for me. I didn't care about the rocks or the roots anymore. I started jogging, then flat out running whenever the ground allowed it, lungs burning, legs screaming. I didn't stop to check behind me, didn't look for the shape again, just focused on putting distance between myself and whatever was out there. By the time I reached the lower trailhead, my chest was heaving and my shirt was soaked through. I stumbled onto the gravel lot, bent over with my hands on my knees, sucking in air. The silence was gone now, replaced by the faint hum of cars from the highway, the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Civilization, safety. I didn't see anyone in the lot. I didn't look back up the trail. I just got in my car, locked the doors, and sat there until my breathing slowed. My hands were shaking so badly it took me a few tries to get the keys in the ignition. Driving home, my headlights cutting across empty roads, I kept replaying it in my head. The footsteps, the way they matched me, the shape slipping back into the trees. I knew it hadn't been my imagination. Someone had been back there. And the worst part? I'll never know what they wanted. Maybe they were just curious. Maybe they were waiting for me to slip, to panic, to make myself easy. Whatever the reason, they stayed in the trees and I walked out. That night reminded me why I never take the woods lightly. It's not the miles or the dark or even the animals that scare me the most. It's the people you don't expect, the ones who don't belong, the ones who watch from just far enough away that you can't quite see their faces. And sometimes that's enough to make the place you love feel like the last place you want to be. About a year ago, I went for a walk at a local nature park that I've been visiting since I was a teenager. It's a big park, cut through with long trails and rough paths that run alongside a wide inlet river. I usually head there on my mountain bike because the place has plenty of drops, jumps, and narrow wooden bridges that make it a good challenge. I know the trails well enough that I can ride them without thinking too much, and I've always thought of the park as a kind of safe escape from the noise of everyday life. But that day, it felt different. The air carried something with it that made me uneasy from the start. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a sense I couldn't shake. Normally, when I'm riding or walking out there, I'm focused on the sound of the tires on dirt or the rhythm of my footsteps. That day, though, every small sound around me seemed sharper, like I wasn't alone. The rustle of branches above me made me stop once or twice. I caught myself looking behind me more than usual. It wasn't busy either. On a normal day, I'd expect to see a couple walking their dog, or an older guy with a fishing pole heading down to the riverbank, but the trails were quiet. The park didn't feel empty in a peaceful way. It felt empty in a way that made me want to leave. By the time I realized how late it was, the light had already started fading. It wasn't dark yet, but the shadows were longer, and the trees on the edge of the trail blocked out most of the sky. That was when the uneasy feeling got worse. I lined up for one of the drops I always take, a steep one that runs alongside a long flight of wooden stairs. I crouched low, picked my line, and went for it. Right as my tires hit the start of the slope, a sound ripped through the air. It was so sudden and loud that my whole body jolted. It wasn't just a bird call. It had this deep, throaty roar behind it, almost human but not quite. It reminded me of the way a large bird might squawk, but stretched out and twisted with something heavier, almost painful. The noise shook me so much that my handlebars wobbled, and for a second, I thought I was going to wipe out. Somehow I kept my balance and made it to the bottom, my brakes screaming as I stopped hard. I turned back to the top of the drop, my chest heaving. That's when I saw him. There was a figure standing there at the top of the stairs. From the distance, he looked human, but the way he stood made my stomach drop. He wore denim jeans, but on his upper body was this strange robe or garment that looked like something you'd expect from a half-forgotten ritual. It was tattered, rough, and covered in patches of feathers. They stuck out in odd directions, some hanging loosely, others clumped together, as if they'd been glued or stitched on by hand. The robe didn't look new. It looked filthy, like it had been dragged through mud and rain for weeks. He just stood there, staring at me. His face was empty of expression, deadpan, as though I was nothing more than another tree on the trail. I froze, my bike still between my legs, my breath shallow. 10 seconds passed, maybe more. Then he opened his mouth and made that same sound again. It was louder this time, echoing down the drop, stretching out until my ears rang. His eyes opened wide with the sound, stretched in a way that made my chest tighten. My stomach dropped in an instant, and I didn't think anymore. I just pushed down hard on my pedals and started riding. The park trails weave and twist in a way that can feel like a maze if you're panicked. I knew it would take me about 10 minutes to get from where I was to the parking lot if I rode hard. The problem was the trails weren't straight. They bent around trees, dipped into small valleys, and crossed over little wooden bridges above shallow streams that ran into the inlet. I kept my head low, legs pumping, the bike rattling underneath me as I hit roots and stones I normally avoided. About 2 minutes in, I heard it again. The same noise, that same mix of roar and squawk. But this time it wasn't behind me, it was off to my right, deeper in the trees. I could feel the sound more than I could locate it, vibrating in my chest, shaking something loose in my stomach. I pushed harder, ignoring the ache building in my legs. The bridges felt like the worst part. They were narrow, slick with damp from the river air, and the sound of my tires on the boards echoed loud, making me feel exposed. The whole time I was waiting to hear it again, and every shadow at the edge of the trail looked like something waiting to step out. And then I did hear it, a third time closer. This time ahead of me, carried over the trail like he had moved fast and cut across the park to wait. I almost slid out on the next bend, the dirt soft from a recent rain. My front tire skidded before catching again, and I nearly slammed into a tree, but I forced the bike straight and kept going. By the fourth time, I was almost at the end. I could see the faint glow of the parking lot lights through the trees. But the sound came again, sharper, like it was right behind me. My chest tightened so badly that I felt lightheaded, but I didn't look back. I just kept pedaling until the dirt gave way to gravel, and the trees opened up into the empty lot. When I finally stopped, I was bent over the handlebars, sucking in air, my whole body shaking. The lot was completely deserted. No cars, no people, just the faint hum of a streetlight buzzing overhead. I stood there for a while, staring at the trailhead, waiting for him to come out. But nothing did. That night, I went home and didn't sleep much. I kept hearing that noise in my head, over and over, like it had etched itself into me. The more I thought about him, the stranger it seemed. The robe with feathers, the blank expression, the fact that he made no move to chase me, just that sound. I've been back to the park twice since then. Both times during the day, both times trying to convince myself it was just some odd encounter with a guy who dressed strangely and made noises to scare people. But each time I've gone back, I can't stay long. The trails don't feel the same anymore. Every sound sets me on edge. Every shadow makes me check over my shoulder. I used to ride there for hours without thinking. Now, I can't shake the memory of that figure standing at the top of the stairs, the sound ripping out of him like something torn between human and animal. I still tell myself it was just some guy, maybe high, maybe trying to mess with people. That's the realistic answer, the one that makes sense. But I can't shake how empty the park was that night, how perfectly timed those sounds were, and how close they felt each time. I don't know who he was or why he was there, but the park has never felt like mine again, and I don't think it ever will. I had decided to do something a little different one weekend. Instead of sticking to the wooded trails I usually hiked, I drove out toward the edge of some farmland where the landscape flattened into wide open fields. There were trails that cut through the prairie there, long stretches of grass broken up by low hills, wire fences, and the occasional tree standing alone like it didn't belong. It wasn't the kind of place most people think of when they go hiking. There are no mountains, no rivers cutting through valleys, just endless space. That was part of the reason I went. I wanted that sense of openness, the kind where you can see the horizon in every direction. I started in the late afternoon, figuring I'd do a loop and be back at the car before dark. The path wasn't marked as clearly as in the woods, just faint lines through the grass and old tractor ruts. The air was calm, no real wind, just the steady warmth of a late summer day pressing down. The grass grew high in spots, brushing at my knees as I walked. Every so often I'd flush a grasshopper or hear the faint scurry of something small darting out of sight. The fields smelled like dry earth and sun-baked weeds. Time moved differently out there. With nothing to break up the horizon, I lost track of distance. I thought I was making good progress until I realized the sun was already sloping low. The light stretched long across the grass, turning everything gold, shadows stretching in thin fingers behind every tuft. By the time I turned back toward where I thought the trail looped, the sky was already bleeding into that deep orange and purple mix that signals the end of the day. The strange thing about fields at twilight is the way your vision betrays you. The sky glows bright, your eyes lock onto it, and the land below sinks into shadow. You can't quite see where you're stepping. The ground seems darker than it should be, a dim, uneven blur. I felt my boots sink into soft dirt, catching on unseen clumps of grass, each step uncertain. The openness I had enjoyed before started to feel different. There's nothing to hide behind in a field. That sounds comforting in daylight. No trees, no rocks, no cover. But as the sun dipped lower, it felt like the opposite. I was exposed. There was nowhere to hide if something else was out there. And at the same time, I felt like I couldn't see what was hiding in the grass itself. The tall tufts swayed, dark against the horizon, and every rustle seemed magnified. I kept going, trying to shake off the feeling. The horizon still glowed faintly, but the ground was almost black now. My own footsteps sounded heavy, muffled by grass. At one point, I froze because I thought I heard footsteps that weren't mine, slower, heavier, deliberate. I stood still, holding my breath, the silence pressing in. The grass around me barely moved. After a long minute, I forced myself forward again, telling myself it was just my nerves. The further I walked, the more I realized I had misjudged how far I'd gone. What I thought was a short loop stretched much longer. The car should have been in sight by now, a faint gleam of metal under the dim sky, but there was nothing, just more field, rolling away in dark waves. My chest started to tighten as the last of the orange glow drained away. The sky was still pale, stars not yet visible, but the land had gone fully dark. And then came the sound that really made me stop. It wasn't an animal call or the wind. It was a sharp rustle in the grass just a few steps to my left, sudden and close, followed by a low thump as something heavy shifted. My body froze before my mind could even process it. The grass there bent unnaturally, like something was moving low through it. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I strained my eyes, but the darkness swallowed the shapes. I forced myself to take a step back, then another, each one slow, careful. My heart hammered so hard it made my arms tremble. The rustling stopped. The field went still again, too still, like the moment after a storm when the air holds its breath. I wanted to run, but running blind through knee-high grass in near darkness was its own danger. A twisted ankle out here could be worse than whatever had made that sound. So I kept moving forward, steady, forcing my legs to work. My ears strained at every direction, waiting for another shift, another sign. The silence pressed in so hard it felt physical. Then, in the distance behind me, the rustling started again. It was faint, but enough to make my throat go dry. Whatever it was moving when I moved, stopping when I stopped. That realization hit me like a stone. My careful pace snapped into a full sprint. The ground was uneven, clumps of grass snagging my boots, the soft dirt slipping underfoot. I stumbled more than once, arms flailing to keep balance. The grass slapped against my legs, the sound of my breathing ragged in my ears. The whole time I kept waiting to feel something grab at me from behind, some weight pulling me down into the dark. I don't know how far I ran, but eventually I saw it. The faint glint of my car parked against the pale strip of sky. Relief flooded through me so hard I nearly fell to my knees. I kept running until I hit the gravel beside it, my chest heaving, my shirt soaked with sweat. I spun around, staring into the field I had just come from. It was nothing but darkness and silence. The grass swayed gently, indistinguishable from the rest of the prairie. No shapes, no movement. Whatever had been there was gone, or maybe it had never been as close as I thought. My nerves twisted it into something worse. That's what I told myself as I fumbled for the car door handle with shaking hands. Sitting inside the car, engine humming, headlights cutting across the empty field, I stared out at the land one last time. It looked harmless, endless and quiet, the same as it always did. But it wasn't harmless. Out there in the dim light, with the ground dark and the sky still glowing, it was the most exposed I'd ever felt. I didn't see anything chasing me. I didn't hear another sound once I reached the lot. But the way the rustling had matched my steps, the way it stopped when I stopped, that stuck with me. Maybe it was just an animal, maybe nothing at all. But running through that field in darkness, no cover, no clear trail, I felt how small and vulnerable I really was. That night taught me something. Hiking through an open field feels safe in the daytime, but once the light fades, it becomes a trap of its own kind. You can see everything and nothing at once, and if something is out there, you have nowhere to go. Ever since then, I don't read or linger when I'm out in open land at night. The memory of that rustle in the grass, too close, too heavy, stays with me. The prairie may look empty, but it isn't. And being out there in the dark, exposed and blind, makes you realize just how much can move unseen only a few steps away. I've hiked a lot of different trails in all kinds of places, and most of the time the scariest thing you run into is your own imagination. You think you hear something moving in the trees, or you think you see a shadow flicker in your headlamp beam, and your brain fills in the rest. But there was one hike I did that still sticks with me because it wasn't just in my head. It was something real, something that made me realize how fast a normal day can turn into a memory you never forget. It was a random day off work, one of those cool autumn afternoons when the sun looks sharper and the air feels thinner. I had no real plan, so I threw a couple snacks in my pack, grabbed a water bottle, and drove out to a trail that I knew but hadn't been on in years. It wasn't a big mountain trail or anything dramatic, more like a winding path through rolling hills, pine forest, and a long stretch of open ridge that overlooked the valley. It wasn't crowded either. I passed one car at the little dirt pull-off lot when I parked, but it looked abandoned, dusty, like it had been there a while. The first part of the trail was easy. The air smelled like pine needles, the dirt was soft underfoot, and I had that quiet all around me that only really happens far from roads. I could hear the wind moving through the tall grass, a couple birds in the distance, but mostly it was just my own footsteps. I had started later in the day than I should have, but I didn't care. I wasn't going far, just out and back. By the time I hit the ridge, the sun was already dipping lower than I expected. It burned orange through the haze of the valley and lit up the hillsides in that last glow before the real darkness comes on fast. I stood there for a while, taking it in. You know that moment when everything is so still it feels staged? Like someone hit pause on the world? That's how it felt. I could see my breath even though it wasn't that cold, and the air had that hollow sound to it, like when snow is about to fall. I told myself I'd stay another 5 minutes, but then I glanced down the slope and realized I had already wasted too much time. The shadows were swallowing the trail in the trees, and once you get under the canopy, it gets darker 10 times quicker. I adjusted my pack and started back down, picking up my pace. At first it was fine, but once I got under the trees, the contrast between the sky and the ground became a problem. The horizon was still bright, painted with the last strips of daylight, but the trail itself was almost black. My eyes couldn't settle. I had that half-blind feeling, like I was walking with one eye open and one shut. Every rock, every root looked like a hole. I slowed down because I didn't want to trip. My footsteps crunched in the leaves, louder than they had earlier. I noticed how sharp the sound carried, bouncing between the tree trunks. It was the only noise. No wind down there, no birds, not even the scurry of squirrels. Just me. That silence grew heavy, and the more steps I took, the more I realized how alone I was. Halfway down the trail, I stopped dead. My ears caught something, a sound I couldn't mistake. It was faint, but it was there. Footsteps, not echoing mine, different, offset. I froze and listened. They stopped too. I felt my skin crawl. I told myself it could have been an animal, but deep down I knew the difference. I'd heard deer before, bears, coyotes. Animals move erratic, quick bursts, brushing against things. This was steady, 2 feet, slow, human. I stood there for a long moment, holding my breath, and then forced myself to keep moving. My pace was casual on purpose, but inside my chest, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The trail curved through the trees, and every time it bent I had that electric feeling that something was just around the corner. Another 100 yards, and I heard it again, quicker this time, definitely footsteps, and they were closer. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't deny it either. Whoever it was had matched me, slowed when I slowed, stopped when I stopped. That's when the panic hit. Not the kind that makes you scream or run right away, but the kind that makes your body feel too light, like your legs don't belong to you. I gripped my water bottle tighter, wishing it was something heavier, something I could swing if I had to. I thought about turning around, shining my light, yelling, anything to break the tension. But some instinct told me not to. If I showed I was nervous, it might make things worse. So I kept walking, pretending nothing was wrong, every nerve in my body burning. The trail narrowed into a section between 2 rock outcrops. The trees pressed in, the ground tilted. I realized if someone wanted to corner me, that would be the place. My breathing sped up. Couldn't help it. I made it through and out into a small clearing where the trees opened to the night sky again. The valley lights flickered far below. For a second I felt relief, like I had space again, but then I glanced back over my shoulder. There was nothing. No figure, no movement, just the black wall of trees where I'd come from. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. It made it worse, because I knew what I had heard. I knew what I had felt, and seeing nothing meant whoever it was had chosen not to be seen. I didn't run right then, but I did move faster. My stride doubled, my arms stiff at my sides. I kept looking back, and every time I did, the woods looked the same, empty but wrong. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the faint cut of the dirt road where I had parked. My car was still there, sitting alone in the lot. I didn't stop. I didn't look back again. I yanked the door open, climbed in, and locked it in one motion. My chest was shaking so hard I could barely fit the key into the ignition. The headlights flared and lit up the trailhead. Just for a second, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the trees, a flicker of something stepping back into the dark. I couldn't be sure, and I wasn't going to sit there to find out. I drove. Even as I pulled away, I kept checking the rear view, half expecting to see someone standing in the glow of my taillights, watching. But the road curved, and the woods swallowed the view. I didn't see anything else that night, but the feeling stuck with me for days, weeks. That quiet pressure of being followed, of being sized up by something you couldn't fully see. People always say your brain plays tricks on you out in the dark. Maybe it does, but I've done enough miles alone to know the difference between my mind wandering and the sound of someone's footsteps pacing mine. To this day, I don't know who it was or what they wanted. Maybe they peeled off when they realized I wasn't going to stop. Maybe they followed me all the way to the edge and slipped back into the trees when my headlights hit. All I know is that hike started as an ordinary afternoon, and by the time I left, it had turned into a memory I'll never shake. Taught me something, too. Out there, it doesn't take much for the balance to shift. One wrong noise, one shadow in the wrong place, and the trail you thought you knew suddenly doesn't feel like yours anymore. And once that switch flips, once you know you're not alone, you don't hike the same way again.